Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UploadVR Gamescast. Not live every Thursday anymore, but pre-recorded every Thursday, premiered on YouTube, so you can still chat with us. Hopefully, one of us is talking to you right now in the chat box, which I think I'm pointing to in the right. No, it's definitely in that direction. Good to see you today. How are you doing? Good to see this person right here. It's Harry.
Hello, hello. It's me. Good. I got lots of things to say today, Jamie. Lots of things to talk about.
Yes, Harry's had a.
Lots of
I'm going to say you've had a tumultuous week.
tumultuous is the right word. Yes.
Based on a thing. We'll get to it in a bit. You'll see what we're talking about. But before we get to any of our many news topics and reviews, I've got to tell you about our sponsor for this week. This podcast is brought to you by Les Mills Body Combat. Body Combat is a martial arts inspired workout featured in thousands of gyms globally and is now available in VR with new punch moves and a surprisingly satisfying strike mechanic with your knee. Get it on the Oculus Store now, or follow the link in the description below. Harry, I've tried the Body Combat now. I did a bit.
How did you find it?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. Last Friday, I was like, I need to work out a bit, but I've got all this stuff I'm doing tonight. I've got more work to finish before I go out. So I'm going to jump into the Les Mills thing, see if it gives me a 20-minute decent workout. And then it threw squats at me, and I haven't done squats in a little while.
Yeah.
A lot of squats.
Yeah.
I did a 20-minute, I did the most hardcore thing, and then I went on a hike the next day, and I was kind of just dragging my legs along for 6 hours. But it was good.
I've never actually worked out in VR. I've never done it. I feel like I should try
you're not a believer
if
in
not this or something. No, I hate the concept of having a headset on my head when I am sweating and working out. I don't know. It just I don't see how it works, but I got to try it.
I was there with you on that idea until Supernatural, which I used to kind of throw in bits and bobs of 20 minutes here and there along with other exercises. I've never used it as just my workout routine. It's always to kind of get a little extra something
supplementary.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Speaking of supplementary, let's go through our members, our esteemed and prized and welcomed members. They are the Shermacker 30, Anthony Mann Wexford, Miles Dyer, Robert Canonas ×2, Handy Panama, Daniel Bowen, Jerome Houston, Andrew King, Skiva 007, Sexy Bicycle, Devin Miller, Matthew May, Rick Tet, 360 Pickleball, Smash Reality, Adam Hartzell, The Absolute Boy, and John Westra. Thank you so much for being members of our little gang. If you want to be a member, you absolutely can be. You can support us in many, many different ways. We've got t-shirts. We've got a mug. I still don't have the UploadVR mug. No one's bought me it. It's very, sad world in which my fans
I want a mug.
Sorry?
Let's get mugs. I want a mug. I didn't even realize we had mugs.
Oh, yeah. They're good mugs, I guess.
There we go.
Only the finest quality porcelain. But, I've personally sourced myself.
You went and checked.
Oh, did I ever? Harry, we got a lot of news to get through this week, and it's good because it's pretty much all new video game announcements. And I don't know if you're watching this, you probably like a video game or two, right?
Lots of 30-second teaser trailers with no gameplay this week.
Well, you always got to bring me down, man.
I'm just saying, they're all. I was like, oh, there's a trailer for this one. Looking at it, it's a 30-second trailer.
Yep, and here we go. 30-second trailer for...
There we go.
One's Alliances. So this is a new video game, as you probably guessed by now, by Cortopia, the guys that did the first ones, Down the Rabbit Hole. They're part of Beyond Frames, which does a whole bunch of other VR publishing. This trailer back here doesn't tell you much other than give you a logo, as Harry alluded to. But what this is basically is following on from the first game, which was 1v1, wand dueling, and released all the way back in 2016, I want to say, on Gear VR, and came to Daydream, before eventually actually coming to Quest and room scale platforms like it's making out here.
It was quite recent on Quest, wasn't it? Last year or something like that.
In the way that almost everything on Quest is.
I guess so, yeah.
Recent. Yeah, but it was very much a 2016 game coming over to 2019 or 2020 or whatever. This time it's bumping up to 3 versus 3. So you've got kind of team-based strategy. As you saw in the trailer there, it mentioned room scale, so you're meant to be taking cover behind things, building out your wand with different spells. So tactically you might have an advantage over the other player. What did you... you've never played ones? Do you have any
No,
impressions
I
on this to
haven't
share?
played the original. The impressions I get from this is very much like Harry Potter vibe. Especially when you say 3v3, for some reason it makes me think of like late Harry Potter films where there's like, they're doing
Yeah.
little mini battles. The other thing I was going to say is, do we know if it's like only 3v3? Can you still do like a 1v1? Do we know?
They haven't mentioned anything like that. Just
Yeah,
3v3 is
interesting.
all I've heard.
Because usually the only thing I think of is usually when they say, when you have VR games that are only like requiring 6 players, that's a big almost ask. If it's only that to get, I imagine maybe they'll have bots or something. I don't know, but
Yeah.
that's a big ask. Otherwise, I would think maybe though, surely it would have like a 1v1 mode or something. But interesting. I'm excited. I feel like it should go well in VR. The whole kind of one spell thing. You think that's natural? I'd love to see
Mm.
more of that kind of Zenith stuff we were playing with, where you've got like, I don't know if the first one did this, but like directional, uh, you know, gesture
Yeah.
based stuff. It's very intuitive.
I never spent too much time with the first one either, but I definitely like. I'm not a big Harry Potter spellcasting guy myself, so whenever someone says they're doing a magic game, I'm like, oh, okay. But
Yeah,
it's definitely a concept that I can't deny is well suited to VR, especially seeing as it's playing on the whole idea of room scale and actually physically immersing yourself. To the Harry Potter point, it is set in an alternate area of Victorian London, so
yeah.
that comes with all the expected connotations for sure. Yeah, no gameplay yet. It's meant to be out. I think it's going to be out pretty early this year. Maybe in the first half. I could be wrong about that, but I'm glad to see Cortopia doing more stuff. They're another Stockholm studio, so alongside like the fast travel and resolution teams, they doesn't feel like they've had as big of a hit as those two. I think Wands has had a pretty good life. Obviously, it's been getting updated right up until last year, so it's obviously had some interest. Your point about keeping those lobbies full is very very interesting because that's obviously like the curse of doing a multiplayer VR game is unless you get people in like straight away, it's very 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 hard to recover from that. So it
Yeah,
will definitely
totally.
be interesting to see what's there on day one and them proving out some sort of like roadmap and community that's going to keep players there.
The first one had some kind of single player campaign as well, did it? Or not?
I think that I think there was something along those
I think it
lines.
was. I think I remember reading earlier today that it was. Someone can
Yeah,
correct us in the
I think
comments
it
if
was like
not. But
a post launch update or something that might have added.
right, yeah,
It's
okay,
one of
that
those
sounds
things
about
though,
right.
isn't it? Whenever a multiplayer game adds a single player campaign, it's always one of those things of really it's just the multiplayer
Yeah,
with AI, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
But
interesting. I'm surprised that there hasn't been like an actual Harry Potter one dueling game in VR yet. You think that's the kind of IP game that I would fully expect
yeah,
Warner Brothers Games or whoever holds the rights to like jump right on, and then it'd be like, give me the same kind of feeling as like that Zombieland game. Like we just
yeah,
go, oh, this is interesting. I'd like it to be good, but I have a feeling it could be easily one of those like IP games. You go, they've made a Harry Potter one game, so I'm
yeah.
surprised that
Cash.
hasn't happened. So this is filling a niche, I guess. Good on them.
There was a Fantastic Beasts experience on Daydream, I remember. But
Ah,
that was just like
interesting.
what it was made by the digital like studio frame store that do like a lot of
Right.
special effects and movies and stuff like that. And it was all very pre-rendered, meeting some of the Fantastic Beasts, but wasn't really in 3D. And you did do some like
Mm,
gesture-based spells, but it wasn't massively compelling.
yeah. Yeah.
And I remember writing about it back in the day, and I remember getting a very heartfelt response about what I'd written about it, but whatever. Uh, so let's that's ones. We'll look forward to that. We're going to move on now to our second kind of newly announced game. This is a bit of a weird one because this is the new game from Devolver Digital, which they've said they'll be teasing all week. But really, I felt like with the first teaser, they just basically released a full-on trailer
It was
of
kind
what
of
the
a reveal.
experience is.
Yeah.
So I think you could probably speak a bit more to this one than I can because you wrote the news story. But the basics here are it's a new game developed by I think it's a one-man studio called Fire Punched,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like kaiju looking tentacle game, tiny
Yep.
diorama island,
Yep.
tentacles, throw things, but also maybe there's
Yeah.
some sort of like puzzle building element to it.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw briefly actually they linked another tweet after the kind of reveal trailer, which was really only another like 30-second trailer, which was more like in the game engine at least. This one showed some stuff, showed like a little town and then the monster. They're like, a very David Attenborough sounding guy is like, "Oh, there's a monster." and then this
He was
thing
really
comes out
good.
of the.
Very, very impressive.
Thank you. And then this kind of octopus monster comes out of the ground. And I think the idea is that it's some kind of like, you'll be smashing things, doing something like that. There's a few other videos. They posted another video on their Twitter with like, I think it was like pulling a bus back on a power line and then like releasing it as like a slingshot. The developers also like posted some videos on his personal Twitter of him like smashing stuff. So it looks interesting. I'm excited to see more. I think it's interesting that it's like a one-man studio who, from what I could tell, this guy's been working on the game for like a while now. And I think maybe Devolver have kind of found it and picked it up as a publisher or something. Because I could see a lot of stuff going back to like 2020 of this guy working on it. So clearly he's been doing it for a while. Looks really cool. I like the art style. I hope it's just kind of like I get to play as a giant octopus and like get points for destroying as much as I can as efficiently as possible or something like that. I love those kind of games where it's like just do the best you can and be creative and get points for that. But yeah, I'm actually quite keen for this. I think it looks kind of cool. I think it gave the right kind of amount of tease for me to be interested and want to know more without kind of giving it all away. What do you think?
I feel like this game could have been revealed during a Nintendo Direct, and even though Nintendo doesn't do VR, I'd have been like, "Yep, that makes
fits
total
right in."
sense. Yeah. It is a very visually charming little thing. It's going to be interesting to see how it does because I feel like we've done the kaiju thing quite a lot at this point. Some games have done it pretty well. There's not like a massively standout kaiju game out there. And the other thing is that it's just Devolver did Gorn as well. Like they published Gorn by Free Lives back in the day, and that's obviously done so astronomically well for a VR game over the course of time. I think it's been in Steam's VR's platinum sellers like every year for like past 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So do they have similar kind of financial expectations for this? Because I don't know if this will be as instantly graspable as Gorn, but kind of hope it is.
I also wonder what platforms it's going to be on because as far as I can remember, they didn't say anything about platforms. And to me, you tell me like I'm a octopus monster, potentially throwing things, and I go, I don't want a wire, and I want to be on Quest. In like a big area, I can kind of run around quickly.
Yeah.
So I hope it's on Quest. I presume it's coming PC VR. I guess is probably a given. I would hope it's also coming to Quest. We'll have to see. And of course, maybe PSVR2 down the line, depending. But yeah, I'm excited. I also feel like I don't know. They did kind of reveal it, but I liked the little tease. They're giving little gifts and things. Yeah, I'm excited. It'll be interesting. I'm watching this space. That's for sure.
It's by the time this podcast's out, we're recording Thursday morning and goes out Thursday afternoon. We might actually have all of this information, right? So
yes, that's true.
Forgive us if we're a little.
If they've
outdated.
Since tweeted out a full trailer or something. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I would like to see it. I think maybe what we're looking at there is PC VR because it's very nice looking, but it'll be very interesting to see.
No jaggies.
Where it arrives. That's game number 2. We got 2 more to go. Let me try that again. The latest game from Xreal has also been announced. Xreal being the developers of Zero Caliber. And I say announced, this is kind of like re-announced. This is Gambit, which is a 4-player cooperative story-driven shooter that was first announced in like 2020, maybe 2019, and kind of just disappeared off the face of the earth.
I was going to say, I completely missed this the first time around. I don't even remember like it. I have no memory of it. This trailer's from then too. So, because I think it says like coming 2021. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I have no memory. But so what did they announce it again? They were like, it's coming out again.
Yeah, they were. I think so. It's being announced by the second internal team called Second Gig.
Right.
But to me, it's like, okay, we got Zero Caliber Reloaded out of the way on Quest, and now we can actually talk about this. It does say 2021 there. There is an updated version of the trailer. I just haven't uploaded it yet because all that's different is it now says coming 2022 instead of 2021. So it didn't really seem like there was much point in doing that. There are some new screenshots and things. I couldn't share many of them on UploadVR.com because there's blood and finger gesturing and things of all that sort that will get you in trouble if you put them on Twitter. But to me, this is sounding like a Payday sort of experience. Like
Mm.
several levels of like bank heists and all sorts of like mischief, basically, with a kind of in your
Yep.
face attitude. I hope it's really, really cool because Xreal have done a really good job with Zero Caliber on quests. They still have to actually finish the PC VR version, and I know with almost any early access game, there's a lot of players that are very, very hopeful they would be doing that instead. But I don't
Yep.
know, we kind of don't have the payday experience in VR yet. Aside from like the closest you'd get, I'd say, is probably after the Fall, where like payday was kind of an evolution of Left 4 Dead, and so maybe this will be an evolution of those kinds of systems. You're going to be getting like upgrades and better cosmetics and everything like that. So yeah,
Is it
it looks.
first half of this year? Did they say? I think from memory.
I think it might actually be the second half of the year,
Yeah. Okay.
but
Well,
it's coming to PC
coming in
VR
one of the
and Quest
halves.
2. Yeah,
One of
it'll
the
be around.
halves.
It's
It'll
coming to
be
PC
here.
VR and Quest 2. I can get one
Yeah.
image up, and that will give us a bit more to go on.
Yeah.
Chainsaw,
Very
bad
much
guys.
payday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right, like really in your face
Looks
attitude.
quite nice up close. I saw the image on the site, but up close, the detail looks quite good actually.
It really stands up.
Yeah.
Those Steam VR screenshots, man. They
Yeah,
really
they do.
help.
Those 3080s. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
Very
we'll
cool.
see. You know, Zero Caliber isn't the greatest, most in-depth VR shooter, but it definitely is about as rock solid as you could hope for an indie developed FPS. And hopefully,
Yep.
if they've had a lot of success with that, that's more resource they can pump into this. Because I feel like if this is if that was a big hit, then this definitely has the potential to like catch on to people that really, really want more co-op driven stuff, especially like
Totally.
with After the Fall. Still to like really flesh out its roadmap and everything like that. That's what I want to see from it, really.
Yeah. Nice.
That's
Can
Gambit.
check it out with you at some point.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we'll be playing loads of this hopefully at some point whenever we get to play it. Final game announcement of today, which is brand newly announced today, just mere hours ago. Have you ever watched Peaky Blinders?
No, I have not been blinded by the piggies. No.
Okay.
I haven't.
Well, that's good. Do you know what Peaky Blinders stands for?
I know.
In the show? Okay.
No, I don't. No.
Oh, so it's bit of background first. This is a BBC show, which is like a gangster thing. It's getting a VR game, but it's called Peaky Blinders because you have a razor in your cap and you take it out and you're meant to
you
blind
say
someone.
that I do actually. Yeah, like I had heard that before. Yes. Yeah. Cool. I have not been blinded by the piggies. No.
That's really good to know.
Yeah.
This is being developed by Maze Theory, who are a London-based studio, did Doctor Who: The Edge of Time, and then brought that over to flat screen and stuff later on. The series is set during 90s, 20s England. You'll be trying to join the Peaky Blinders gang, who kind of mainly operate out of Birmingham, which I can only imagine in 1920s England was a terrifying place to be. And you're going to be like meeting with kind of some of the main cast. So Tommy Shelby, who's played by Cillian Murphy in the show and in the game, and Paul Anderson, who plays Arthur Shelby in both, are going to be there. There's this kind of thing. Maze Theory's been talking about this game for a while, so it's been public knowledge. It's in development. And one of the things they've always said is they're working on this kind of reactive AI system. So like maybe the idea being like, if you open a door really, really quickly and quite aggressively, instead of them being like, oh, hello, they're going to be like, what's wrong? Or something like that. Like your body language is going to have some level of effect, which I think is a very, very fascinating idea. It's just a case of a case of resource, right? Like Maze Theory are a good team. They're not the biggest team. So what's going to be the limits of that system? Because that system is really what I want to see out of VR. I want characters to be reacting in realistic ways that bring me that bit closer to believing we're in an environment and interacting together.
And you also don't want like the situation where half the time it reacts to something and then the other half it doesn't because they haven't got the situations for like certain things. You know, like you open the door and they go, "What's wrong?" And then you like slam on a table and they like don't react at all.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't want to feel like I feel like with this kind of thing, it's very hard to get the right amount of like, oh, we've got enough that it feels like it's always kind of working, but then you do something else and it doesn't work. So you're like, oh, what's kind of the point if it's only half the time? I'm also surprised that like we have Because correct me if I'm wrong, but the Doctor Who game, I played some of it and not all of it. It didn't have any people in it, like actual character models, right? It was all just like
No,
you were
you're
just kind of
right.
walking around, and there was like a face, I think, of the Doctor in the TARDIS, at some like a
Yeah.
hologram face. Whereas this looks like it's going for kind of not realism, but it looks kind of this isn't gameplay, is it? Surely, oh,
No,
some of
this
it
is
might be.
this is this is one of those really funny, like, I feel like this was a 1995 original PlayStation game CG trailer kind of vibe, which I respect immensely.
Because I was gonna say, I wonder if the faces will look like that, like in the game, like that kind of I wouldn't say good, but yeah, I'll be interested to see what it kind of looks like if we're talking. Because when you say also to the AI thing, it kind of gives me LA Noir kind of like we're
Mm.
talking to a gang, we're reacting to things, and I'd be interested to see what the actual kind of character models look like, given that there wasn't any in their previous games. That's not something we've kind of seen them do, and would be fairly important for this. So
Yeah, I was going to mention LA Noir as well because when you were talking about the limits of the system, in my mind, LA Noir is the one that just fell into meme territory in the way that you could do some of the, even though that game is largely scripted, some of the things you did just got completely off base reactions, and there's still some of my favorite videos to go back and watch of just how badly some of that stuff is aged, and that's what they really have to watch out for. But you're right, like they haven't really played around with character models yet, and you like they're not announcing headsets today, but you've got to assume this is like if they want to make money, it's probably coming to Quest 2.
yep,
So it's not going to hit this kind of level of fidelity on the
yeah,
platform because you can't
totally,
do that basically. Hopefully it will
yeah,
look better than Doctor Who did on the platform because that was a
yeah.
fine port, but it was a little rough around the
There's a
edges.
little I remember lots of jaggy surfaces.
Oh yeah,
I
very
remember
much so.
lots of jaggy lines.
I
Yeah,
think it was very much one of those games that was in development, then the Quest became a thing, so it had to become
yeah,
it had to be
totally.
ported over to Quest. The other thing
Yeah,
is the show itself is coming up for its last season. It's been away for a couple of years, and they're doing the last season, I think, later this year.
yeah.
So I don't know where it's going to fit in the timeline. Then again, there's plenty of opportunity for stuff like that.
Could
There
it be
was another,
one of those game stories where it just kind of fits in like
yeah.
ambiguously, like doesn't really make anything kind of too strongly one way or the other.
The absolute masterclass in that, I don't, this is going to be a very obscure PS2 era reference, was the Shield the video game, which fit between two seasons, had like one of the original cast in there, and the plot was, for a show that has like some of the best plotting ever, the plot was just dire, and I loved it. It was just the worst thing ever. So let's aim for higher than that, guys. And that, I believe, will take us to the end of the news, which is a good point to remind you about our sponsor for this week, which is Les Mills Body Combat. This podcast is sponsored by Les Mills Body Combat. Instructors Dan Cohen and Rachel Newsham will guide you and motivate you through every workout. Body Combat is available on the Oculus Store now. Check it out today by clicking the link in the description below. If you haven't done squats in a while, make sure to do some squats before you do it, or like don't have any plans for the next day because you'll ruin your plans otherwise. Harry, that was the news. It's time
Beautiful.
to delve into Harry's hard week, everyone. Because
Here we go.
Harry's been tasked with reviewing Virtual Reality 2. You remember last week we talked about its announcement, game from Tender Claws, follow up to the original story based thing that we both said we really enjoyed, but we like there was a lot of exposition, a lot of standing around waiting for characters to finish saying things, and we were kind of hoping this would build on that. Harry, are you ready to give us your not final impressions, but your where you're at with
Yeah,
it?
where I'm at with it. Yeah. So basically, I haven't actually finished it yet. I'm about somewhere between like a third and 50% of the way through. It's hard to tell because of the chapter structure is like, I think some are shorter and longer than others. But I think I'm, roughly about a third to a halfway through. Um, I'll go through in a second, like how the game kind of works and what it's about. But basically, it is very, very buggy at the moment. Um, so I've kind of said, well, we'll do a review in progress because I also don't want to say, hey, we're not going to review this because we've talked to Tender Clause. I said, hey, there's lots of bugs. The team is aware of some of the bugs they said, and they're working on a patch that will come out 2 weeks after launch. So I'm hoping that fixes most, if not all, of the kind of very frustrating bugs that I've had. And I didn't want to kind of say, oh, yeah, we're not going to review it for another 2 weeks, because I think there's a lot to talk about that this game does very, very well and is very, very interesting and unique and innovative. So I didn't want to put this message out of like, oh, it's very buggy, so just kind of forget about that, because it doesn't work. Because I think there is stuff that people should absolutely be thinking about that it does really well. But yeah, so I'm waiting to see if that gets resolved. But it's not like the game is not playable, as you can see in the footage. Like, I am playing it. You just kind of encounter some stuff that makes it frustrating and kind of stops you from progressing all the way, through sections or whatever, stuff like that. But basically, it's a very different game to the first one. The first one was very much like you're in an area. The game, kind of ferrets you between environments, and you do things in them, puzzles, environmental interaction stuff. This one is like a linear action adventure game. You're moving through areas. There's like chapters. It's got like more of a story. And it's basically set. The first one was all about VR headsets, like kind of conceptually playing around with that idea. This one is about the metaverse. And so it's about, you start off in Scottsdale, which is this kind of version of the metaverse they've got, represented in the game, which pretty quickly gets shut down. I think they call it turned off or something. And you basically you get put into this giant mech, which you can kind of see the, porthole of there. You get put into that, and you have to basically escape the kind of metaverse that is folding in on itself, and you go through all these areas. That's the premise. It is really, really cool the way they do this, because you're basically in a giant mech ship that is like one of the big robots from the first game. I'm not sure if it is Chaz from the first game or if it's just like looks like him. I think it might be Chaz. It's hard to tell. But the way you move is like, they've secretly designed this as a vignette, so you basically don't get sick. At least I don't get sick, which is like the smartest thing ever, and you don't even almost realize they've done it. It took me a while to kind of figure that out. But you've got a throttle at the bottom, which all the controls for the mech are like environmental. So you've got a throttle, you've got left and right toggles that you can pull above you, and little toggles for like jumping. Then you also have these arms, one of which is a vacuum cleaner that can suck up things and then shoot them back out like a gun. The other is like a claw, and it can shoot out a teleport tether. So you can actually teleport, which you can kind of see me doing here. And the thing with the arms is, when you're using them in the mech kind of environment, you can then go into this view, which is like a room scale view. So what they've essentially done here is I think genius. It's kind of been like, well, you can use smooth locomotion or kind of room scale. Certain situations will need you to use either. Sometimes you can just choose. But it's not like you need a menu or anything. Like, I didn't need to set a setting to not get sick. I didn't even need to think about anything. You don't need to set a movement preference. And the game actually uses both. It's super inventive. And I love that the game is just designed around the player just doing this stuff and never having to think, what movement setting do I prefer? What, do I want to teleport? Do I want to do this? I love that it's just like integrated into the game. That stuff's amazing. So that's kind of the premise, and I think that's what it does really interestingly, and it's so much fun when it does work. It feels so kind of fluid. This is kind of one of the platforming sections where you're kind of jumping and moving. They say it's technically a platformer, but the cool thing that it does too is because it has the ability to be room scale, smooth locomotion, change things up. It goes through all these different genres that kind of pay homage to so many VR genres that you love. There's like the platforming bits like this. There's a bit where you go into the bottom of the headset and there's like a giant VR headset. Well, technically you're really small, so you get into like a normal size VR headset, but you're tiny, and you can drive it around like a plane and you start shooting things. There's another bit where you basically play Beat Saber and it's in like a wellness center. Then when you're playing the bits where you're shooting, it's very much like Space Pirate Trainer. You're dodging bullets, you can kind of reflect things, you've got different weapons. There's all these really cool and very fleshed out kind of different game modes, which is amazing. I think that stuff is so cool. Kind of exceeded my expectations in that regard, and I wish I could play it better. The problem is there's a lot of bugs that get in the way of you kind of playing the game at the moment, and I hope they fix them, and they seem like the kind of bugs you can fix. It's stuff like characters, the minor ones, there's minor bugs, which is like characters facing the wrong way or characters' voices not being in the right place.
Mm.
Like that guy, I can't remember his name, but often he will kind of face the incorrect way, or he got stuck in the lift one time, but I couldn't go down where I needed to because he was stuck in the lift.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Then also, um, there's you get stuck kind of repeating things because often sometimes you need to reboot the game because some of the stuff can't be fixed just by like circumstance or doesn't fix itself, which means you end up replaying parts of a chapter, often large parts. There was bigger problems where like scripted events just didn't start. I walked into a room and nothing happened, and then you kind of go, "Oh, have I done something wrong? Have I gone to the wrong place?" You would search around for a bit, then I restart the game, go back, play through it again to get to that area, go back, and then it kind of starts again. You go, "Oh no, it was just a bug the whole time." I had instances where I like put the headset back on. It was a black screen and I couldn't resume from where I had paused it, and then I had to reboot it. And then it put me back at the beginning of the chapter. I had really weird bits where characters would talk over each other, were saying dialogue of stuff I'd already finished. There was bits where I couldn't walk through like a gate because I'd finished a section. The gate was closed, but they were like, "Hey, you've got to get rid of these guys if you want to go forward." And I'm like, "I've already done that, but they're not here and the gate's closed." So yeah, and today I basically got to a point where I was like, "Look, this is I think an amazing game if it worked, but I'd rather put it down, see if they fix it, and then play it like properly and give it its due." Because the other thing too is that this studio is not one that has put out stuff like this that's particularly rushed or buggy. So I think maybe part of that is because it's very, very super ambitious. It's way more dynamic. And I think they've tried to fix some of those problems we were talking about where you're standing around waiting for a character to monologue by having characters move with you or talk in your ear and stuff like that. But that seems to have introduced bugs where they talk over each other or dialogue gets cut off or two people talking at once and they shouldn't be. So yeah, it really actually is like almost upsetting to me that it is buggy because I didn't want it to be because I think it would be like a really amazing game otherwise. And I hope that they fix it. I hope people are kind of patient enough to come back to it when they do. Yeah, that's kind of the abridged version. There's longer, kind of more detailed thoughts from the site, but yeah.
It's interesting because we've been talking about these bugs in the context a bit of budget cuts, which if people remember when that first released many years ago on PC VR, I handled the review for that, and that was so buggy that we were in this situation again. I was like, I'm not putting a score on this game yet. It's like it's crashing and it's quite unplayable in many sections, but it's since been like Neat Corp have managed to overcome that, and that's one of the best-selling games on PC now, and people don't think about it for the bugs, they think about it for the gameplay, and that's definitely the kind of situation I want to see happen here of, with this patch being a couple of weeks out, we're going to have probably a rocky couple of weeks of people like buying this and being like, why was something so buggy released? Because clearly it shouldn't have been released. Like it clearly needed like another month or whatever to really iron it out, but that's sometimes just the nature of the Quest store, isn't it? Like games have to release on a Thursday slot and they come out earlier than they should sometimes. And that is a shame because, like you said, this is not a developer we know to be rushing stuff. And if you look at the gameplay that we've got on the video version of the podcast, it's clearly not a rushed, lazy thing. Just watching
it's quite
this,
spectacular.
And even just watching this like 8 minutes of gameplay, there's so much thought and inventiveness and like genuine identity in the environments as well. I can't believe how many different environments we've seen in the course of a 10-minute video just here. Yeah. So and the other thing I was going to ask you about is obviously with that complaint we had that we were talking about last week of sometimes the first game had characters that were so talky and you were standing around being like, am I meant to be doing something here? Is that a problem in this one or?
See, that's hard. It's something was still kind of figuring out. I think it's less of a problem. I still think because the reason I also wanted to stop is because I found it hard to kind of assess that because there was points where I was like, am I meant to be doing something or is this a bug? It was kind of like, and that made it hard to assess that particular part of the game, which is an important part of like, has the game improved or have they improved that kind of, I guess problem they had in the first one. So I think the monologuing thing is less of a problem. And as I said, they do attempt to kind of have characters walk around and move with you, which is definitely better than like standing in one spot. There was some stuff early on though, before you kind of get the mech and you're introduced to the like metaverse area where you are definitely just like standing in an area and people are talking and it's very like arty conceptual script. Like, there's and they're clearly setting up characters there to come back later on, as some of them I think do. I've seen a few already, but it's a bit like, I was standing around watching these croquet balls. I think it's croquet, like this giant croquet ball playing croquet, and then being like, "I love croquet" for like 5 minutes, and I was like, "Yeah, cool." And then it bugged, and then I had to restart, and then I had to listen to it again, and I was like, "Okay, this is kind of frustrating." So yeah, I just think like it's really, as you said, there's lots of different kind of environments. It does a lot of things really cool. I think it's absolutely awesome that someone could jump into it and not have to worry about getting motion sick because they won't even think about it, presuming that vignetting works for them, which I think for most people it generally does. But it's like what I was saying in Zenith last week. I don't want to be playing a game where I'm putting this black circle around my face. It's kind of frustrating, and it never feels like that with this because it feels like I'm in an area. And they do so many interesting things with scale, because you're kind of tiny in this giant mech, and the mech is bigger than the world, and then you can go room scale and play like a version of Space Pirate Trainer. And it's so varied, and it's such a beautiful kind of the way that they work in all these genres and stuff from other games is really beautiful and doesn't feel kind of it doesn't feel like it's kind of cheap or anything. It feels like it's actually a really kind of beautiful way to kind of go, oh, we're exploring the metaverse and we're doing that through all these different kind of games we've already had. So yeah, I think the thing is too is that like some of the bugs, if I had played through it and it was just like characters facing the wrong way, a few odd things that were frustrating, would have been like whatever. But it got to the point where I was having difficulty telling if I was enjoying the game because I was having to restart things and play things again. And then I was like, wow, I can't get any grasp on like the pacing of this even. Because I'm having to kind of replay sections. And the replaying stuff doesn't take too long, but it's just one of those things where if you do something more than once, you're like, oh, and then I started like speed running through areas and just ignoring enemies. So I was like, oh, it doesn't matter if I am here. It kind of breaks the immersion level too. So yeah, I really hope that they fix the bugs up, and I think they're bugs that can be fixed. Like it's not like it performs beautifully. There's not a frame hitch in sight. It is like optimized perfectly. There's just bugs with it, like resuming sometimes, and then people in the game doing weird things, or things not starting, or I think it's because it's a bit more open than their other games, and you're moving a lot more. That's something they perhaps haven't dealt with as much. Yeah, and it's a different type of game. It's not open world, but there are definitely also levels where you're kind of put into a level and gone, okay, go explore, find out where to go next, and it's quite large. And I think that has led to some weird interactions that they weren't expecting. That's what I was finding, at least. And look, maybe other people will play this. I would be very interested to know if people play this and they have a fine experience or they don't. So please do reach out, because that's the thing with bugs. You just never know. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think there's enough of them that people will probably bump into some. I would be very surprised if it was just me. And, there's enough there, I think, to warrant it, kind of not holding off, but, being kind of cautious for now.
Yeah, it's only 2 weeks. I think this time 2 weeks we'll probably sit back in here. Hopefully you'll have had some time with the patch by then, and we can go over it a bit more. Because I really want to play it as well. I just haven't had the time this week and last week with Ultra Wings and Zenith and everything. So I want to get in and talk about the best things. Maybe we could do like a bit of a spoiler cast or something in 2 weeks from now or something.
Yeah, totally.
That might be fun.
Totally. Because I'm pretty bullish on the rest of it. I think once they polish that up, I think it's actually got a lot to it that's really cool. It's a very cool development of the ideas in the first one. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Cool. Well, we'll fingers crossed. Like you said, we'll keep our hopes out for that one. We've got one more thing to talk about this week, and guess what? It's Zenith.
It's the Zenith cast. It's our reoccurring segment.
Yeah.
It's our first reoccurring segment.
Well, the thing is, I've been playing Zenith for how long has it been out now? 2 weeks. I've been playing Zenith for 2 weeks, yeah. And I think I'm basically kind of at the point where I can put a final stamp on it now. And if you've been to Upload in the past couple of hours, you'll have seen I've done that, and I've gone with a great score for the game, though it's gone back and forth between essential, great, and good for me at various different points. So let's do the
Interesting.
basics just in case you didn't already know, although you almost certainly do. This is a fully online VR MMO. You kind of quest through multiple zones with basically as many friends as you like, provided you're all on the same server. Build up a character in that very traditional RPG sense. You can pick from being a mage, you can pick from using swords, then you have 3 smaller subclasses that you can actually interchange, even though you pick a starting one. And then you just go out into the wild, you beat up enemies, you do some boss encounters, you do many fetch quests, all in pursuit of that level 40 cap that's currently in the game, which I've been playing for 2 hours. Not 2 hours. I've been playing for 2 weeks, and
Yes.
I've probably played about 20 to 25 hours of it now. I think I'm on level 28, so that gives you some kind of view of like how long you can expect to play. Probably another 10, 15 hours to get to the very, very end, because obviously as you get towards the end of the quests, does that thing where everything starts getting much, much harder and you need to grind loads.
Yeah.
It's very much an MMO transplanted to VR in its current form. So that means you are going to be doing all of that grinding, which, for a lot of people is a big turn off for the genre, like yourself anyway. So for a lot of people, it's going to be this non-starter experience, although obviously what we've seen in the past couple of weeks and how many people have been enjoying it, definitely a lot of people out there that really, really do want that kind of experience in VR.
Yep.
The thing I would say about it is, yes, there are those kind of more traditional and undaunting elements. So it's actually quite an easy MMO to get into. You've got godstones that give you powers, but it's not like the most complicated system. It's just gesture-based actions, and as you level up, you get more of them. You can put some resources into like boosting some of their stats, just the same way that you can change some of those subclasses. So there is some scale for like minimizing and maximizing a character build, which definitely people that are really, really into the genre are really going to like. But for me, the things that work best about it are the things that are unique to VR. So actually, my favorite thing in the game right now is the cooking, which to get like, health and stuff you need to eat. To get stuff to eat, you need to make it unless you find it out in the environment. And that can be like, it starts off with just a basic cookie, for example. And all that involves doing is heating some milk, which is a little mini game where you kind of test a timer on the boiler so that you don't burn the milk and make it all horrid. And then you've got like flour that you have to flip and make sure you don't burn, and you can actually flip it, and you actually have to make sure you don't burn it, and then you can put some sugar in the thing as well.
That's exactly how I make my cookies at home.
Oh yeah, just
it's just I'm just flipping things.
Flip that
I'm
flour.
pouring milk. I'm balancing milk.
Yeah, okay, it's not the most realistic.
No,
it's not Cooking Simulator, Harry.
Obviously, it's not Cooking Simulator. Yes, no.
But it's a fun, engaging thing that, if you were working with a normal flat screen MMO, you'd just be clicking.
It'd be a menu.
Buttons.
It could be a menu here too, couldn't it? Like,
yeah, it could be.
You wouldn't want it to be, but you can definitely see you being like, I'm going to go to the kitchen, then a menu comes up and you're like, craft cookie.
Yeah,
and you just like get it. Like,
and that would be like, if stuff like that was all the way through the game, I would not be so hot on it, because I'd be like, I don't think this is doing anything for the VR genre and combining with MMO in any meaningful way. But I think the cooking is a very important glimpse into how the developer Ramen VR wants the game to grow in the future. And every element of what we've got right now is just the starting point that hopefully it can bring some more of those VR elements into. So the other two great points to that VR element are the climbing and the gliding, which is just locomotion in general. I think is great. You can climb basically any surface in the game. You can get from one side of the map to the other using the kind of population 1 T-pose very, very quickly. And that makes it a really unusually quick-footed MMO. Obviously, it's usually quite a sluggish genre, getting from one side of the map to the other. And the best side quests in the game are actually like, there are these floating islands in a lot of the zones, and they're like, oh, there's 2 switches hidden on in each island. Go and find them. And then you've got a limited stamina gauge, so you kind of like have to clamber over them really, really quickly to find them. And that's like, again, a genuinely different thing that you wouldn't see.
It's like made for VR. Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't see in another MMO, basically. And that's really touching on something for me where it's like, okay, this is why this thing needs to be in a headset and it's not just any other MMO.
And you say like the cooking is representative of kind of the roadmap forward. That also makes me think of like the bow and arrow
Mm.
class
Yep.
coming up, because that is a very kind of like I'm drawing the bow back. It's a very VR action, as
Yeah.
we know bow and arrows are, compared to some of the other weapons where it's kind of like shooting and kind of pointing and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's interesting because I think the bow and arrow will also be a very good VR edition.
Yeah, well, and that's the combat in general is an interesting one because you can clearly see it already making those attempts to be VR specific. So the swords have a limited cooldown after you hit them, so you can't just go bah.
Yeah,
And then you have the mage is basically, it's not really a mage, it's more like you're like the ranged weapon class.
yeah,
You have
it's a
these
gun.
wrist mounted gauntlets with laser
They're
sights,
guns.
which you can kind of aim from the hip with, but they you're still using motion controls, and I can understand how that's the like basic starting point for something that could
Yeah,
grow to be a bit more technically
totally.
complex going forward. The other great thing about the social element, about the VR element, is the social, which is where the game obviously
Yeah,
really shines because there's just so many like tiny things that really help you build meaningful relationships in the game, whether it's pointing to a chest to a complete stranger, or like coming in to save a complete stranger when they're like up against a battle too hard, and then being like straight away just being like you're welcome, waving and flying
yeah,
off.
that's so
Or if
cool.
yeah, if someone's trolling you, just be like a friend is trolling you. If you
Go
don't know
away.
them, don't troll. Just be like, stop it, stop it. Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
just another
yeah.
layer of human interaction that you're just
Totally. I
naturally
hadn't
getting
kind of
from
considered
putting
that.
it into
Yeah.
VR, right?
Yeah.
And
And it's getting rid of
that's
that kind of text-based, like slow input method of like, hi, how you
yeah.
going? You can just literally be like, hey. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. There's no need for emotes, there's no need for
Yeah.
text chats or anything
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
It's
Mm-hmm.
just you're there in the world and you can express yourself far more personally than you ever have been able to before, which is I think is really, really important. So you've got that. Like I said, I think the combat needs a bit more work in all those areas. I would love to see the mage have like more precision based aiming, so like hitting weak points and stuff, so that you are properly lining up like a little sight or something. And also, I feel like the melee combat could benefit from like a kind of until you fall kind of system of on screen prompts or whatever of block here, then you can return attack. I would definitely rather if we had like less enemies in those overzones, overworlds, and no, and like each of those encounters be more memorable than the current thing, which is like 5 enemies in a certain zone, and you kind of clear them all out without really thinking about it. But that's that's a potential direction I think the game should go in the future. But that is getting into the more traditional VR combat side of things, and I can understand if that's not what people really want out of it. The things that definitely have to change, and obviously this is marked as early access on Steam, but you don't get to mark games as early access on Quest and PSVR, so there's really no kind of uh, warning about this. But it's just the game. I can't stress this enough. The game is just not finished in any way, shape, or form. It's been in development for a long time, but really what you have is maybe, I don't know, somewhere between like 10 to 15 overworlds with like 2 or 3 people that give you quests that like there's maybe like an hour or so of questing and grinding in each one, but they're like in very specific areas of the overworld, so you don't even really fully explore each environment. Then you move on to the next one once you've hit the right level and you've got the right quest, and you do it all again until you get to the end of the quest line. And it's a very rinse and repeat formula right now that is just like this kind of bare bones structure to get you to the end and say there's a game
Yeah.
there. And now it's like, okay, we've got the whole race.
Got
Now
a
we need to like
massive
go
player
back
base
and
too. Now,
yeah,
yeah, we're gonna go back and really MMO it out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because like this first overworld that you've played in has a dungeon and multiple areas to climb up and get collectibles and things like that, and like a daily quest system with a racetrack and everything like that. Then as you keep going into more and more zones, you find less and less features. That's the only
Yeah,
real
right.
dungeon in the game so far. Everything else kind
Okay.
of just plays out in those overworlds. So it definitely needs them to go back in and like add, new like little offshoots to areas here and there, which I'm pretty confident they can do and are planning to do. Just the same as they're planning to add that extra class, which again, not much variety in the classes right now. And obviously with MMOs, people really like to hone in and build their own character. And there's not massive amount of scope for that right now, but I'm sure that's coming as well. And then there's the bugs and the glitches and everything like that, which are really, really bad right now. It's so easy to run into chests hanging out in the middle of the air, like textures that don't properly mesh together and like lead like weird little holes into the space-time continuum.
It's giving me Skyrim flashbacks.
Yeah.
Skyrim.
But it is a Skyrim situation. Like there's text that like overflows from the menus, everything like that. And again, for an MMO, you'd expect these things. For an early access MMO, you'd certainly expect these things. So
totally.
You're like, I'm willing to forgive it a lot more. Like I think if this was a single player game and the way it was done, it would be like, no, this is a straight up avoid. This kind of stuff is unacceptable. But this is very much a live starting point for the game. And that's really what it comes down to is, as it stands, I already think it is VR's best MMO, and that's somewhat because there's not a lot of great competition out there, but also because it does genuinely deliver on all of the things you'd want from an MMO and on like a pure structural form from the start. It's just really like, this really is just the starting point, and it's going to be a really, really important and telling year for Zenith if that roadmap is able to get all of these things out in the next 12 months and we're able to make it up to, let's say, the holiday season and have our game of the year discussion. This game is going to have had plentiful, meaningful updates to be in that conversation by the end of the year, I reckon.
Yeah.
But, they're a very well-funded team. It seems to have been a very successful launch for them. So I'm kind of hopeful we'll get there.
Yeah, it's honestly more successful than I ever imagined it to be. Like, when it came out, all of my Twitter timeline was just like people talking about it. Obviously, it was huge on Steam. I didn't kind of expect that level. I hadn't thought even it was that kind of, there was that much interest in it. So clearly people want this kind of thing. I'm excited to watch from afar. I'm probably never going to play this on my own personal time again. If I have to do it for something for work, I will. Not my type of game, but I can appreciate that it is what it is. Like, it does what it does well for people that want that. So I'm really interested to actually see how they deliver on that roadmap over the next year.
Yeah. I think for me, it's one of those things of like, I've really enjoyed running through it, and I've done a lot of really great, fun social things in the game, partnered up with strangers, played with you, played with Z, played with David from, former UploadVR staffer, because he's super into the game. But it's still, to me, it's like I'm just testing the waters still. I'm looking forward. The thing I'm most looking forward to is if the game comes to PSVR2 and is in any better condition there, because again, that's where I would probably want to play an MMO where I'm getting the best visual fidelity and hopefully the best comfort as well.
How is it on current PSVR? You have tried it on PSVR, right? 'Cause I think when we talked first, I haven't tried it yet. Really? Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
why?
And because I'm just, generally speaking, if I can play something on PSVR and the motion controls and everything aren't going to get too much in the way of the experience, then that's where I'm going to do it, just because I'm a PlayStation fan. I like being in that ecosystem.
Wow.
And those are the kind of like...
That's commitment.
Yeah, that's where I want to experience these things.
That's incredible commitment. I'm so shocked.
I mean, it hasn't been that often recently. Like, I played all of Wonder on PC VR because it was like, this is such a high fidelity experience and I want the best resolution and the most powerful kind of experience. But again, like, I'll definitely go back and replay Wonder on PSVR 2 if it comes.
So it must run well on PSVR if you've been playing it then. Like, it's good frame rate, looks okay.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think probably if you put them side by side, and I'm going to be doing a graphics comparison very, very soon, you would probably say the Quest version looks worse. I'd imagine, because it's less powerful hardware. It has to. But when you add in like the added clarity and everything like that, I think it's definitely the one. It's easier on the eyes than the PSVR version.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, and again, going back to that unfinished thing, like everything here in the first area, the fractured planes, looks pretty all right on a texture front. But once you get into like just off to the left here is a pirate cove, and it's just Blur City. Like there's
Yeah,
like
right.
pirate
Okay,
ships and stuff
interesting.
that where it's just like basically the texture is just plain orange and stuff like that, you know?
That also makes me think too. Like, if we're talking about delivering on this roadmap, like, although this is the good base, I do wonder, like, if they're gonna be splitting their time between going back stuff that's already there and filling in
Mhm.
textures for that. How much time are they gonna have to spend filling in the existing stuff versus making new stuff? And will that detract from the time? Will
Yeah.
that push back the new stuff because they're like, well, we've still got to get the texture sorted for the Pirate Cove.
Yeah, for sure. It's
That
all about
kind of
resource,
stuff.
right? Like you would
Yeah.
hope with this launch they're going to be able to staff up and just
Yep.
really start planning something that's going to last for many, many multiple years, and
Yeah, exactly.
have a
You can
team that
totally see it
is
doing that too if it does
yeah,
done right. Yeah. Yep.
yeah, and have a team that is going to go back and address like past content, and a team that's working on all the new stuff. The Cyber Ninja, I think,
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
be really, really fun to try because it's going to be both ranged and melee. It has a sword as
That's
well,
right. Yeah.
and yeah, that would be really, really interesting. That seems like it's probably a couple of months out at the very, very least. But yeah,
Mm.
it's a good
Yeah, I
starting
think
point.
so. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. I'm definitely going to be playing more. I'm going to get to the end of the quest line with my current character build, just so I can say I've done it and speak on authority about those things. And then I'm probably going to give it a break for a good while and jump back in when maybe we're 1 or 2 updates in to see
Yeah.
what's really, really changed, because that would be a big turning point as well.
Totally. Very cool. I'm looking forward to talking about it next week again. Just joking.
No Zenith next
This
week.
is-
That is a promise. Unless there's
No,
some giant headline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't make that promise just yet, Jamie. You never know.
All right. We'll next week you'll know. We'll call it a Zenith free episode if there is indeed no Zenith talk. But on that note, let's draw it to a close there. It's been a great episode. Lots of new games, lots of impressions. Next week we'll be back with. I actually don't know what's coming out next week, if anything. So who knows what next week will bring.
It'll just
Harry,
be us
thanks so much
riffing
for
off
being
each
on.
other for a full hour. Just
Yes.
jokes galore. No critical thought, only jokes.
Just off the cuff all the way through.
That's it.
That's why you're here, really.
It is.
Cool. All right. Have a good week, everyone. Enjoy VR. I'd say enjoy the metaverse, but it doesn't exist yet, so you can't enjoy it. Escape the metaverse. That's what I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll catch you next time.
See you next time, guys. Have a good one.